Now we will look at how inheritance is used in Java. There are two types of inheritance used in Java language, which are class inheritance and interface inheritance. Class inheritance. Here we create a new class as an extension of another class. In Java, it uses the extend keyword to implement the class inheritance, primarily for the purpose of code reuse. That is, the derived class inherits the public and public data of the base class. There is one special case in Java inheritance, which is Java only allows a class to have one immediate base class, single class inheritance. The subclass itself can add its own new behavior and properties. The Java Lang object class is always at the top of any class inheritance hierarchy. How inheritance is provided in reversibility. Let's look into the example. These relationships are mainly based on the usage. This determines whether a certain class has a certain thing. This relationship has to reduce duplication of code as well as bugs. This shows that class 1 has a speed. By having a separate class for speed, where we do not have to put the entire code that belongs to speed inside the van class, where it is possible to reuse the speed class in multiple applications. A very important fact to remember is that Java only supports only single inheritance. This means that a class cannot extend more than one class. Therefore, following is illegal. Super keyword in Java. The super is a Java keyword. As the name suggests, super is used to access the members of the superclass. First is accessing superclass members, and the second one is use super to refer a hidden field. In this example, it used the super keyword to access the print method in subclass which has been inherited from a superclass. You can also use super to refer to a hidden field. The first use of keyword super is to access the hidden data variables of the superclass hidden by the subclass. As in the example, suppose class A is the superclass that has two instance variables as integer a and float b. Class B is a subclass that also contains its own data members named A and B. Then we can access the superclass variables A and B inside the subclass B. Here, member can either be an instance variable or a method. This form of super most useful to handle situation where the local members of a subclass hides the members of a superclass having the same name. The following example clarify all the confusions. Variable names which are in the class B is same as variable names in the class A. Therefore, it implies that class A information are hidden at class B. Now we will look at the second point, which is interface inheritance. In the Java programming language, an interface is reference type similar to a class that can contain only constants, methods, signatures, and nested types. There are no method bodies. Interfaces cannot be instantiated, they can only be implemented by classes or extended by other interfaces. In this example, there can be many number of method signatures, but those methods are not implemented inside the interface. Note that the method signatures have no braces and are terminated with a semicolon. To use an interface, you write a subclass that implements the interface. When an instantiable class implements an interface, it provides a method body for each of the methods declared in the interface. In Java, it uses the keyword implements to inherit interfaces. However, a class can implement one or more interfaces. This has made Java get rid of the impossibility of multiple inheritance. One situation is to use accessive superclass member. Now we are looking at how inheritance is used in constructors. The following example illustrates how to use the super keyword to invoke a superclass's constructor. That mountain bike is a subclass of bicycle class. Here is the mountain bike subclass constructor that calls the superclass constructor and then adds initialization code of its own. When creating a constructor of a class whose parent class has a non-default constructor, that means if the constructor having parameters, then in the definition of the constructor, it must call the parent's class constructor in the first line of the subclass's constructor using the super keyword. The super is an instance of the parent class. The way this makes sense is that an object is potentially very complex and each class's constructor may do many things to make sure that when a class is instantiated, the object is created and ready to go. Therefore, when subclassing a class, the constructor in the subclass should make a call to its parent class constructor first, as to make sure every required initialization is done well. This is so because the subclass potentially has no idea what initializations the parent class must do. We can call the superclass constructor using super keyword with no arguments or super keyword with the matching parameter list. If a subclass constructor invokes a constructor of its superclass either explicitly or implicitly, you might think that there will be a whole chain of constructor called all the way back to the constructor of object. In fact, this is the case. It is called constructor chaining and you need to be aware of it when there is a long line of class descent. Java compiles with the defense in depth principle when implementing constructor inheritance. You don't have to provide any constructors for your class, but you must be careful when doing this. The compiler automatically provides a no-argument default constructor for any class without the constructors. This default constructor will call the no-argument constructor of the superclass. In this situation, the compiler will complain if the superclass does not have a no-argument constructor, so you must verify that it does. If your class has no explicit superclass, then it has an implicit superclass of object which does have a no-argument constructor. If the class mountain bike does not call bicycle's constructor, Java compiler automatically assumes that the user wants the no-argument constructor and call it for you.